station. And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard procedure. This is something that is practiced and rehearsed and made sure that we do follow our standard procedures to make sure that everything is still safe. Bob and Doug exit safely and go back into quarantine and get ready for our next launch attempt.
Looks like they're getting a chance to stretch their legs, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dan, Jesse, I'm monitoring along in the scrub procedure right now. They're getting the goes to get the folks back to the pad, the crew that'll open the hatch. So they have notified the team chief, launch engineering, to return to the pad. As a reminder, around the pad, the Air Force and NASA set up roadblocks to make sure nobody gets into the hazard area. So they will head to the roadblocks, they'll pull them open so that they can drive to the pad. So launch director, I think, is estimating it's still about 15 minutes for the crew to drive all the way down out to 39A, get up the tower, and then begin operations on the hatch. They have confirmed that the purge of the Dragon service section, which is nitrogen during the countdown to avoid an oxygen leak, that is back on air now. The crew access arm is on air, so they're ready for the egress team to get up into the tower. But it's going to take them a little bit still, I think, to drive down the road in the vehicles and go up the elevator. But everything continuing to run per a normal scrub countdown, which we have had the opportunity to practice with the crew in, for example, the dry dress rehearsal last Saturday, after we had done the static fire of the Falcon 9 the day before.
And I've been seeing a few questions, people asking why aren't we just trying to launch tomorrow? As John and I was talking us through, there's some very specific times you have to identify when you're going to be able to link up with the International Space Station. You'll only have so much fuel, which can only generate so much energy to make sure you're going to intersect with the station, which is flying at over 17,000 miles an hour. So you're hitting
Dragon
one bullet
SPACEX
with another
comms.
bullet. Some of our other launch attempts are able to make it
Go
to
ahead.
station, but have much longer
Yeah, Dragon,
times.
to prevent us from losing comms, we're going to be switching to umbilical at this time. I'm going to be unmerging Countdown 1, but we'll keep you updated here on Dragon Ground.
Okay, yeah, we see the Cedrus countdown with a little over 3 minutes. We'll stand by for your next call on umbilical.
Copy.
The crew getting a call, they're just going to reconfigure some communications. But as to why we're not launching, say, tomorrow...
And core on Countdown 1, loops are merged.
But when we pick our launch attempts, we also have to take in mind some of the human factors of these attempts. Some of these other launch attempts may exist, but it would require Dragon taking in excess of 30 or more hours potentially to reach the station, which could wreak some havoc with the sleep shifts cycles, not only for Bob and Doug, but also for the crew on board station that has to line up their sleep schedule with Bob and Doug as they arrive. And the crews on station and Bob and Doug will be operating off of Greenwich Mean Time once they get there.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check umbilical.
SpaceX Dragon loud and clear on umbilical.
Copy, have you the same.
Still getting good comm between the crew and the core here in Hawthorne. But really, just to sum it up, we pick our launch attempts for a number of reasons, not just can we make it to the station, but just how long is it going to take to get there. And that's why Saturday is going to be our best option. We're going to be targeting that one at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time for our next attempt. And it'll be a little over 19, maybe a little over 20 hours until we actually arrive at the space station, if we're able to get off the ground on Saturday.
And this gives Bob and Doug, a few days to kind of shake off the nerves from today's launch attempt, give them some more time to rest, and again, get ready for our launch attempt on Saturday. If you're just now joining us, we did scrub our Demonstration 2 mission today. And as John mentioned, we are waiting for the egress team to make it back to the launch pad, head up the tower, and help the crew, or help Bob and Doug egress the vehicle.
Dragon SpaceX for closeout team status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team has arrived at the pad and they are proceeding to the White Room.
Copy that.
You heard that call out. The egress team is at the pad and are proceeding to meet Bob and Doug in the White Room, where they can open the hatch and help them exit the vehicle.
Yep, and we'll continue to stick with Bob and Doug until we see that hatch get open and them start to make their way out. And then they're going to, oh, and there we can get some views once more back at the pad. You can see that egress team moving back in. They were wearing the black clean suits that we saw as they were helping Bob and Doug get into the Dragon just several hours ago. They're now going to get on the elevator, make their way back up, down the crew access arm, and then we'll get that Dragon side hatch opened.
And as we saw earlier, this is a very tall structure, but that elevator is pretty quick there. So we saw them enter the bottom of the tower. It should be a very short time before they make it to the top and are able to get to the White Room and open the hatch for Bob and Doug.
If you want.
And should just be a few more moments. We'll see that closeout team make their way back into the crew access arm and down the hatchway. And again, if you are just now tuning in, we did have that scrub just about a little under 17 minutes before launch. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th. At launch time, it's going to be another instantaneous launch time. It's going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time over there in Florida. And assuming an on-time launch, it'll be a pretty similar flight that we were looking at today, where it'll be roughly about 19 hours before they make that initial contact to the International Space Station. They'll get on orbit and execute a series of 5 different burns to gradually raise their orbit until they're just a few hundred meters below the station and maybe a few kilometers behind. And then they'll do all of the final approach initiation maneuvers. And by that point, the team here in Hawthorne will be working very closely with the team down in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Weather for Saturday, still not ideal, but it's roughly what we started out with today, where we have about a 40% chance, possibility of violation, and it'll be tracking a lot of the same issues with cumulus clouds and potential precipitation. We'll also be keeping an eye on all of the downrange weather. Oh, it looks like we're seeing some people start to make their way into the crew access arm now, so we should see them get that Dragon side hatch open in just a few minutes. But as a reminder, we'll be looking at weather around the launch pad and weather downrange in their flight path on the way to orbit, and that's always checked just in case they have to do any kind of emergency maneuver and land down in the Atlantic Ocean. We will be making sure that the weather is at acceptable levels all the way until they're into space. So can see the team coming down now. Should see the hatch open momentarily. And then we can begin to get Bob and Doug out of the Dragon spacecraft.
And again, we are staying live until Bob and Doug are safely out of Crew Dragon. You can see on your left-hand screen the team getting ready to open the hatch for them and help them out of their seats.
And at this point, the launch escape system has been disarmed. That was done after we successfully offloaded all of the propellants from the first and second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. There are propellants loaded into Dragon, so the teams look like they were just doing what we call kind of a sniff test, so using a portable detector just to assess the atmosphere around the Dragon capsule itself before they get the hatch open and bring Bob and Doug out.
All of this is standard safety procedures for egressing the vehicle. This is to ensure the safety of the crew, as well as Bob and Doug.
Dragon SpaceX for status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team is at the White Room. They are configuring the crew arm for egress, expected to take no earlier than 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
It should be just about 10 minutes. As a reminder, they're in the White Room. We walked through that a little bit earlier in our coverage this morning. The White Room named simply because of its color, and that's something that started all the way back during earlier Gemini missions. And that is literally the last place on planet Earth where astronauts are standing before they get loaded into this vehicle. It has an environmental control apparatus and a seal that it can put right up against the Dragon spacecraft just to keep all of that dust, dirt, and Florida humidity
And Dragon
out of the
SpaceX,
capsule.
we're right at 3 hours in seat rotation. I just wanted to check in with you on comfort levels.
I'd say no changes, Jay. It hasn't been too bad at all.
Copy all.
And obviously at this point, with the launch escape system disarmed, we have loosened up straps and gotten our feet out of the straps on the bottom of the seat, so it's a little more comfortable anyway.
Copy all. Looks comfortable.
Right now, the closeout team just going to take a couple of minutes to configure the White Room. They'll set up a seal between it and the Dragon spacecraft just to make sure we're not letting anything from the surrounding environment get into that spacecraft, which is kept very pristine, obviously, for the crew members once they're inside. They have a small bridge that just connects the crew arm to the capsule itself. Just making sure they have a nice clear path for their entrance and exit from the spacecraft. So it should just be a few more minutes. We'll see that hatch get opened, and then our crew members can start to make their way out. And you heard seat rotation. They rotate the seats prior to their actual flight to where they're a little bit more parallel to the ground, and that just puts them directly in front of those displays. We'll see them rotate down, just giving them easy access to get out of the capsule.
And as Dan mentioned, we want to keep FOD out of the capsule. FOD is foreign object debris, so that's basically anything that does not belong inside of the vehicle. So not just like dirt and dust, but just anything that was not meant to be inside of there should not be there. So we are doing everything as a standard procedure to make sure that we do keep FOD out, especially since this is going to be another attempt and another opportunity for FOD to enter the vehicle. As they're exiting, we still make sure that we keep everything basically like a clean room.
Dragon SpaceX, you may hear some vehicle venting in about 20 seconds.
Copy.
John Isberger here with the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We are continuing to wait for the crew to open the side hatch. We've got the cameras showing astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken inside. Visors are up. They've gotten their feet out of the restraints. Gloves are off in case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now, make sure pressure checks are all good, make sure there are no concerns with gases, be it the propellants of the vehicle or just nitrogen gas that we use as a purge. Currently, we are coming up on about 50 minutes after the plan T0. To just reiterate what Dan and Jesse have been talking about earlier, we had a good countdown. I had a lot of fun saying there were no issues on Falcon 9 or Dragon of a technical sort. The range was ready to support. The downrange weather looked good in case Dragon had to make a unplanned abort splashdown in an escape maneuver somewhere in the Atlantic. And we even had the, once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back early, the weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way except Mother Nature, the weather. It's Florida, and we got into the back end of the tropical storm that has now gone ashore in the Carolinas. But unfortunately, that left everything disrupted just enough to where we violated several of the weather rules, and we did not have enough time for them to go green. Green meaning where the range says conditions are clear and you are all right to launch. We were still red on those rules, and that was the end of the countdown for the day. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading the liquid oxygen onto the second stage. That was both the logical breakpoint in the countdown procedure where we could take a scrub without loading one more propellant on the vehicle. And at the same time, that was when the range gave us the final bad news that we weren't going to get green conditions before the clock ran out of T0. So continuing to watch right now as the crew works to get the hatch open. They send final commands, making sure that everything's go. Once the hatch is open, the ground crew can verify that there is nothing in the way under the seats that Doug and Bob are sitting in, and we will get the seat rotation again, get them back a little bit more vertical. They're more on their backs right now in the launch position, so they'll rotate, then they'll help them out of the seats, and they'll come back out and down the arm and off of the tower.
Dragon SpaceX, for status, it looks like the closeout team is inflating the hatch CO, the arm CO right now.
Okay, yeah, we can see some folks outside the window.
Sorry, we've been quiet for a few minutes, but if you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have to scrub today's mission due to weather. We were just under 17 minutes away from our T0 time at 4:33 Eastern when the call was made. We were still in violation of a few of the weather constraints that just are really there to inform teams when it's safe to launch. So we're looking at weather both around the pad and weather all the way on the way to orbit for them. So we did have to scrub. Since then, we've been able to get all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed, and right now the closeout teams are there in the white room, so right at the end of that crew access arm. They're configuring the big seal that goes around the Dragon capsule just to make sure its environment is isolated from all that nasty Florida weather, and then they'll be able to get the hatch open, and we'll get Bob and Doug back out.
Well, we're coming up on just under an hour since the planned T0. Again, if you're just joining us, well, we've been here summing up for a while.
Dragon
Launch
SpaceX
did
for
not-
status.
Yep, stand by for status check.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, closeout team's still working to do the hatch seal inflation. Expect another 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. We violated 3 weather rules. The weather rules finally cleared up, but it was long after the planned T0. The SpaceX egress team did return to the pad. They were sent through the roadblocks that surround the pad, demarcating where the hazard area is. Team's up on the crew arm, and as you just heard, SpaceX talking to astronauts Bob and Doug. They're working the seal around Dragon. Then we make sure that Dragon capsule pressure is equalized with the crew arm, and then we'll go into the hatch opening sequence. So we've still got several more minutes. We'll carry that as we go. A couple of points to bring up. Once the crew comes off of the Dragon and comes back down, goes back to the crew quarters to de-suit, we will be
Dragon
leaving.
SpaceX for awareness. We're going to command the vehicle into pad hatch open in preparation for hatch opening.
Copy that.
Okay, that's good. That'll get them into the sequence to make sure that the pressure is inside and outside.
And note, this will equalize cabin pressure, so you may notice something there.
Okay, thanks.
So as I started to mention, once everybody's off, we'll leave the Falcon 9 Dragon, the crew arm, where they are. That is in the launch support position. There's no plan to come back down to horizontal. The vehicle is designed to stay vertical. Now, if we were to find something wrong during the countdown as we go through data review, that could mean that we have to come horizontal, as we did late last night, early this morning, as we were working a ground issue on the transporter erector, and then we went right back up. But currently, no plans to come horizontal. We'll stay vertical up to the next launch attempt on Saturday. There will also be, as is typical, engineers will go through all of the data they collected today, and then there will be a report out in what's called a Delta Launch Readiness Review, probably this Friday before we get into the next launch attempt on Saturday. That's where the engineering disciplines will brief management, chief engineer, launch director, mission director, the NASA customer, where we stand on today's countdown, what we learned as well as our readiness to proceed into another countdown attempt. But currently at Kennedy Space Center at historic Pad 39A, we're getting ready for the hatch opening and the crew to be able to leave Dragon, come back down, get out of their suits, and wait to go another day, hopefully this coming Saturday, the 30th.
And Dragon SpaceX, sure you see the vehicles in pad hatch open. The AVVs are now open, and that nitrox injection is complete.
Yep, we felt it and heard it, and copy all.
And Dragon SpaceX for status, the closeout team is stepping into hatch opening now.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker back here at the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We've got another camera up, and you can see the side-by-side view on the monitor. Astronauts Bob and Doug inside, waiting for the hatch to come open. We're still in the middle of a equalization step. Make sure that pressure inside the Dragon is equal to the ambient pressure, so that when we open the hatch, it just comes open without any extra force. You can also see the SpaceX team is up alongside the capsule. They are removing essentially the thermal protection devices. You know, for example, if you have a door handle on your automobile, if you're going to have to re-enter from outer space, you're going to have to put a small heat shield over that door handle. Otherwise, any kind of protuberances, cavities could be subject to burn up. So they have to take their time, make sure that we get all of the thermal protection safety devices off, so that they can then get access to the mechanism to go ahead and bring the hatch open.
And there it is. You're looking at the American-made rocket and spacecraft that will return American astronauts to the International Space Station from American soil for the first time since the retirement of the space shuttle, last flown nearly 9 years ago. Today, we're giving it another shot with our partners at SpaceX. Wednesday's first attempt was postponed due to that wild weather. But if all goes well today, we will mark a new first in NASA's storied history and usher in the commercial crew era of American spaceflight.
At 3:32 Eastern Time this afternoon, NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken are expected to lift off from Pad 39A aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft atop a Falcon 9 rocket. If the weather cooperates, today's attempt will mark SpaceX's first ever flight with crew and the beginning of a new chapter in human spaceflight.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Kennedy Space Center, home of the wild Florida weather, which is why we're sitting inside again today, but this time a little bit closer with some plexiglass between us.
Yes, and I'm Lauren Lyons, a senior Starlink development engineer at SpaceX, and joining us today is retired astronaut and NASA meatball lover, Leland.
Thank you, Lauren and Marie. It's great to be back. That weather was really wild last what, 2 days ago, 3 days ago?
Yes, it feels like yesterday. I don't know if depending on how much you slept, could be the same day.
I
think
much.
It was Wednesday.
But down to T minus 17, and our teams made the right call. You know, we didn't want to go through that weather and have something happen. And I think that, you know, we're back to this hollowed ground thing, Pad 39A. We are, you know, my time back there was in 2008, 2009 on Space Shuttle Atlantis, launching to the International Space Station and building out the International Space Station. So now Doug and Bob can launch Crew Dragon and go to an assembly complete space station.
Yeah, and I know it's been really touch and go with the weather. Yeah. We were looking at it last night. We were looking at it this morning. The teams are going to continue to monitor things, so it's kind of touch and go. But at last check, it was a 50-50 chance. So hopefully those odds are going to be, I don't know if they're going to improve, but 50-50's not bad. It could be worse, right? So we have teams all over the country covering the action from SpaceX headquarters in California, Mission Control in Houston, and our social media desk in Washington, and of course, right here in Florida.
Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second test flight and its first test with humans on board. We're a little more than 4 hours away from liftoff. Bob and Doug have had their lunch and have completed their medical checks in advance of launch. In about 15 minutes, NASA is going to turn the crew over to the SpaceX team. And once that happens, there are a series of key milestones to complete as we count down to T0. The first one is suit up. Now, the suit-up room is located in NASA's Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, or the ONC. Here, the SpaceX team is going to help the astronauts put on their suits and perform key suit checkouts. From there, the next step is crew walkout. The astronauts are going to leave the ONC building for final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside of the facility before they head out to the launch pad.
And following final goodbyes, the crew will get in a Tesla and begin the roughly 20-minute drive to Pad 39A. Now, once at the pad, the crew will ascend the fixed service structure in order to board the spacecraft in a process we call crew ingress. During ingress, the SpaceX team will run a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and the vehicle interactions are all functioning properly.
And after all the vehicle and crew checkouts are completed, the SpaceX closeout team will close Dragon's hatch with Bob and Doug safe inside. About 40 minutes before launch, the crew access arm, which is that long suspended walkway that the astronauts are going to use to board Dragon, it's going to retract away, followed by the arming of the launch escape system.
Once the arm is retracted and the escape system is armed, that's when propellant loading on the Falcon 9 rocket will begin. About 5 minutes before liftoff, Dragon will be configured for what we call terminal count. This is when Dragon's onboard computers take control of the vehicle.
And at T0, again, a little over 4 hours from now, if all goes well and the weather cooperates, Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 will lift off from Pad 39A, carrying astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. Roughly 12 minutes after liftoff, Dragon will separate from Falcon 9's second stage, enter its activation phase, and begin using its own onboard propulsion system to carry Bob and Doug to their destination, which is the International Space Station. And as I mentioned previously, Bob and Doug are just finishing up their lunch, and we are currently awaiting their arrival to the suit-up room.
And while we await that, you will notice over the course of this broadcast that we do not have crowds gathered here at Kennedy Space Center. And that, of course, is one of the impacts of our protocols to protect each other and our teams. We would normally have tens of thousands of guests here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to view the launch. But even though we couldn't host a lot of guests here, you can still join us through every step of this historic mission from wherever you are. We have a team dedicated to those of you following along on social media, and NASA's Tahira Allen is in Washington right now leading that effort. Hi, Tahira.
Hey, Marie. And hey, everyone out there. My name is Tahira Allen, and if you are one of the 4.9 million people tuning in on Wednesday, we are so glad to see you here again. If you weren't able to witness the pre-launch activities on Wednesday, you are in luck because I'm here to bring you all the excitement happening on social media around the nation. This is a big day for both NASA and SpaceX, and we are ready for you to be a part of it. We had a lot of people engaged on Wednesday, so we want to see if we can top that energy today. We will be sharing your photos and thoughts live on air during today's broadcast, so don't hold back and show us how you're getting ready for liftoff. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag LaunchAmerica on NASA's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'll be monitoring that hashtag LaunchAmerica all day to highlight your social media posts throughout the show. You'll also be able to engage in social media polls during today's broadcast. And so even if you tuned in before, these are brand new polls, so just head on over to NASA's Twitter to cast those votes. So I know most of you are tuning in from home today, but that doesn't mean you can't get involved in the action. Check out NASA's Instagram and Facebook to find our Launch America augmented reality filters. They place you right at Kennedy Space Center, and you can actually see the Falcon 9 rocket lift off in a pair of sunglasses. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our first ever global NASA social. So head on over to NASA's Facebook to join the group. We've got all new social badges, a nice fresh photo here, some Q&As with some very special guests, and also behind-the-scenes tours of Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And not to mention, just an awesome community of people excited to witness this moment. So, just right here in training, getting ready for that Launch America. So if you're just tuning in, to get us started, we have a poll for you on Twitter right now. We want to know what NASA logo you are sporting for today's launch. The iconic meatball or the iconic worm? Head on over to NASA's Twitter to cast those votes. And with that, let's head back to Lauren at Kennedy Space Center. Lauren?
Thanks, Tahira. I don't want to sway the vote, but you know, I'm all about that worm.
Meatball.
The debate rages on.
Aside from our debate, the purpose, or the main purpose of today's demonstration mission is to put Crew Dragon through the final operational tests to officially certify the vehicle for human spaceflight. The SpaceX and NASA teams have put years of work in development, testing, and training to get us here today, and now we are just around the corner from seeing Falcon 9, Crew Dragon, and Bob and Doug lift off for the first time, and doing it from that same historic launch pad that first sent humans to the moon more than 50 years ago.
Now, it's really good that we're inside today because I'm still ready to run across here and try to hitch a ride to space on that Crew Dragon. It's a beautiful vehicle, what SpaceX and NASA have done together to create this incredible rocket. It makes me want to just run out that door right now and get out there.
Well, you're not allowed to leave today, but Leland, I don't know if you've seen some of the comments on social media. You've been nominated by a lot of followers to fly one of the future missions of Crew Dragon. So I don't know.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
So we are just about 3 miles from Launch Complex 39A. Leland, don't get any ideas. I know that's not that far. That's where liftoff will happen in a little over 4 hours. And so we want to check in now with the team at SpaceX Hawthorne, where NASA's Dan Hewitt and SpaceX's Jesse Anderson are keeping an ear on operations. Good morning, guys.
Hey, good morning, Marie. Thanks so much. First off, hashtag Team Worm. But hello from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name's Dan Hewitt. We're here for round 2 for this historic launch.
And Dan, we're so glad to have you back here today. Hopefully the weather is working in our favor today. It looks really sunny and nice out there, so fingers crossed. My name is Jesse Anderson, and I'm a lead manufacturing engineer here at SpaceX, and we are so honored to be NASA's partner in returning humans to space from the shores of Kennedy Space Center. 10 years ago, we sent the Dragon that's displayed right behind us on its first orbital demonstration flight, and I speak for all of us here at SpaceX when I say we could not be more excited to finally be sending humans to the International Space Station.
And just as a refresher, today's mission is known as Demonstration Mission 2 or Demo 2. This is going to be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people to the space station. Demo 2 is an end-to-end flight test from launch to docking all the way to splashdown in the Atlantic at the end of their mission. And this is the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station. Right now, SpaceX and NASA have teams working together around the country. On the SpaceX side, they have teams at the Cape performing final launch day checkouts as we speak, just to make sure Dragon is healthy and good to go.
At the moment of liftoff, we will transfer authority over Dragon from our firing room in Florida to Mission Control here in Hawthorne. Mission Control will have insight and command of Dragon systems for the entirety of this upcoming mission. And since Dragon is a highly autonomous vehicle, our teams in Mission Control will be continuously monitoring the health and performance of the spacecraft through the entire duration of its journey. That's from liftoff all the way until Dragon splashes back down on Earth.
While there are a number of people on headset here in Mission Control right behind us, the mission director is the one in charge. It's also where the SpaceX Core, which stands for Crew Operations Responsible Engineer, who's essentially the voice talking to astronauts throughout their flight, will reside.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. SpaceX has successfully completed 22 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, and that includes 21 trips to the International Space Station. And to get us where we are today, not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, but we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
One of the most important safety features on Crew Dragon is the launch escape system. It's a huge advancement in the safety of human spaceflight, and SpaceX was able to demonstrate the system in 2 important tests. The first one coming back in 2015 with the pad abort test, which we're watching some video back from right now. And then a little bit more recently, last January of this year, the in-flight abort test. Dragon's launch escape system is outfitted with 8 Super Draco engines that are integrated directly into the spacecraft body. This enables Dragon to separate from Falcon 9 and carry astronauts to safety in case of an emergency on the launch pad or all the way up to orbit.
And in addition to the launch escape system, SpaceX has completed over 80 parachute tests, which includes nearly 30 tests of just the upgraded Mark III parachutes that's flying on today's vehicle. And that's to ensure a safe landing back on Earth, even in the unlikely event that one of those 4 main parachutes fails.
And we can't forget the significance of our first demonstration mission just last year, which itself was an end-to-end flight test to and from the International Space Station, just no actual humans on board. But now, though, let's go to the one and only SpaceX's Principal Integration Engineer, John Innsbrucker, for our first status update. John?
Oh, you're so kind, Dan. Good morning from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. As Dan said, I'm John Innsbrucker, and I'll be bringing you status updates throughout today's countdown. We're currently just inside T-minus 4 hours, 9 minutes. Today, as mentioned, is our second launch attempt. The first attempt was scrubbed on the 27th. In that attempt, the team proceeded deep into the countdown, but when 3 weather rules concerning lightning and cloud cover were no-go, and there was no chance of improving, the SpaceX launch director stopped the countdown at just inside T-minus 17 minutes and the launch was scrubbed. Now, following the scrub, we drained back the propellants from Falcon 9, and the crew returned to left the capsule and returned to crew quarters. Now, since the scrub, Falcon 9 has remained vertical on the pad, as you can see there on the monitor. It's remained powered up. The launch crew currently reports no significant issues on the Falcon 9. Minimal activity has occurred on Dragon over the same period. The most significant task was topping off oxygen and nitrox in the environmental control system. Now, we just finished up a weather briefing to the crew a few minutes ago. Conditions at Kennedy Space Center for launch, 50% chance of violating conditions, which is also 50% chance of good conditions. The basic concerns are precipitation, cumulus thick clouds, anvil clouds, all related to the threat of lightning. We're also watching the weather downrange in case there is an abort and Dragon has to splash down off the coast. Further, several hundred kilometers away, we are watching a series of weather patterns that look like they're going to be good, so we are continuing into the count right now. Coming up at T-minus 4 hours, the SpaceX launch director will perform a poll. That'll verify the conditions are safe there at the pad to open it back up to just the support crew. That support team will enter the area and begin preparations for arrival of the astronauts at the White Room at about T-minus 3 hours. Following that poll, the launch director will provide a countdown status briefing. We might be able to hear that depending upon what's going on the nets. But right now, as the clock continues counting down, we're going to check in with Gary Jordan. He is with the flight control team at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Mission Control, Houston. How are the teams looking there, Gary?
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to Mission Control Houston. This room you see behind me is one of 3 flight control rooms at the Johnson Space Center, also known as Flight Control Room 1. This is where teams monitor and direct all of the operations on the International Space Station. It remains staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And today the team is especially focused on monitoring today's launch operations and making final preparations for Bob and Doug to dock with the station tomorrow morning. Today, I'm joined remotely by NASA astronaut Rex Walheim, who was on that last flight from American shores 9 years ago, STS-135, with Doug Hurley. Rex flew on 2 shuttle missions before that and is now the Deputy Director of Safety and Mission Assurance here at the Johnson Space Center. Rex, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Gary. Nice to be here.
Now, Rex, we're closing in on the suit-up process for Bob and Doug down at the Cape. What were some of the thoughts going through your head as part of the crew suiting up for a shuttle flight for the very last time?
It's just it's a really exciting time. You've kind of practiced it many times before, but you know this is for real. But again, you never know for sure whether it's going to be for real. So for STS-135, we only had a 30% chance of launching on our actual launch day. So you're thinking, it's probably not going to happen. But you know, we got to be ready for game day, and so you get suited up. And you walk out those storied corridors where Neil Armstrong walked out before he went to the moon, and get on the Astrovan in our case and head out to the launch pad.
Rex, as I recall, the weather was not so favorable for STS-135 in the beginning of the day, but started looking a little bit better towards launch time, and you were able to get off the pad, though you had to scrub for weather on 110 and a few times on 122. It seems to be a normal thing for human spaceflight.
Yes, it is. It's like I say, you never know what your launch day is. So you have to be prepared anyways, no matter whether the vehicle may have issues that they're working at the last minute or the weather may not cooperate. So you get ready and do the countdown. And on STS-135, it didn't look very good. Like I said, we had only a 30% chance of go. And so we got out there anyways, and we got strapped in, and we weren't sure whether there was going to be go or not. And our commander looked outside and said, well, I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is it's raining, but the good news is it looks like it's clearing to the west. And sure enough, they brought the count back down to T-minus 9, where they checked the weather, and they decided it was go. And so, hey, we're going. This is going to be great. Then they brought the countdown all the way down to 31 seconds, and the clock stopped. We didn't get any alarms or anything, and we're kind of looking around, what's going on? And we heard over the intercom that the launch was halted due to a malfunction. And we're like, what kind of malfunction? And sure enough, we figured, okay, well, now we're not going to launch for sure. It's just 31 seconds from launch. We've only got like a minute hold time, and so your mood starts going down. And figured, well, doesn't look like it was going to be it. But turned out the team at the Kennedy Space Center knew what the problem was. They wanted to make sure that the gaseous oxygen hood, the arm, had moved out of the way so the shuttle could launch. They took a camera, verified it was, then they picked up the count. And when they pick up the count from 31 seconds, they think, holy cow, now we really are going. And so it doesn't give you a whole lot of time to collect your thoughts. But all of a sudden, T-minus 6 seconds, the engines start up, and T-minus 0, you feel that big jolt. And, hey, it is today, and you get ready to do the mission.
Well, here's to hoping for the best today. NASA astronaut Rex Walheim, thank you for joining us. Let's go back to the Kennedy Space Center to watch the suit up in action as we continue to count down to launch. Leland.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Hey, Rex, it was so great to fly with you on STS-122. And I remember you turning to me saying, hey, Leland, it's going to be great. You're going to do great. And you made me feel so good about launching into space. And I just really appreciate your support and your kindness. And that was a great mission, and I really appreciate you, man.
Hey, it was great fun, Leland, but you're a pretty big guy, and so you didn't exactly leave a lot of space sitting next to you on launch for your buddy here. I kind of had to, kind of scrunch myself to the side. I remember that one sim we had where we put our spacesuits on and got into the simulator, got all strapped in, and you being a former NFL player, having played professional football, like I say, there wasn't a whole lot of room for me, so I kind of squeezed my way the best I could. But I remember saying to our commander, Steve Frick, I said, hey, Steve, next time we fly with a professional athlete, why don't we pick a jockey? So it was a little bit, crowded there, but it was a wonderful flight, and it was an absolute pleasure to fly with you, Leland.
Likewise. And when you came home on 135, I was with your family. I remember it was a night landing, and I said, hey, Fergie's back, and your son, I'll never forget this, he said, hi, Dad. And it's all about the families, and you did such a great job on that mission, flying with Doug on that last shuttle mission. So thank you, Rex, for everything you've done. We're going to go live in crew quarters in a minute and see Bob and Doug suiting up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rex. And my takeaway from what Rex had to say is, you're telling me there's a chance. There's a chance. There's a pretty good chance, actually, 50% in fact. And the astronaut crew quarters is where astronauts live in seclusion before missions to space, and it's where Bob and Doug have been living for the past 10 days. Now, the suit-up room inside of the crew quarters is something of a national landmark in and of itself. This room was first used as a suit-up room for Apollo 7 back in October 1968. And for every crew mission since then, when launching from U.S. soil, serving 400 different astronauts on a total of 150 missions. This is the room where Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins suited up over 50 years ago, where astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen suited up for the first shuttle flight, STS-1, back in 1981. And for every shuttle flight over the next 30 years, think of that. Every flight to the moon, every flight of Skylab and Apollo Soyuz, and every single space shuttle flight started in that room. And Leland, I know many of us have experienced some form of quarantine over the last several months, but I would imagine that 2 weeks in quarantine in preparation for a space flight is unlike any other time in your life. What were some traditions that took place?
Oh, we would get together and sit down and sometimes tell jokes and try to make the mood a little bit lighter. We would review our notes and things, but we would bring our families in and have a crew meal together with our families, and that was really touching. And it's just card games, different things to get ready for that iconic mission to space.
Absolutely. In many ways, everything prior to this moment was preparation, and everything after this is the mission. And prior to Wednesday's first attempt that we told you about, the suit-up room was last used for the final shuttle flight, STS-135, in 2011. And I want to mention one more detail about that mission. We want to show you a picture of the crew from the last American spaceflight launching from U.S. soil. In the picture, if we can bring it up, you'll see Doug Hurley. There it is, Doug Hurley. He was the pilot for STS-135. Today he is the commander of Demo 2, the spacecraft commander. Also suiting up for that mission was Chris Ferguson, Sandy Magnus, and Rex Walheim, who we just heard from a few minutes ago. And we are standing by to go into the suit-up room. We just passed the T-minus 4 hour mark, so suit-up is just beginning now, and there is our first look in the room. There is astronaut Doug Hurley getting into his spacesuit, and he's being helped by one of the suit technicians there. So this is our first look in the room. Again, Doug Hurley, he has flown into space 2 times before. He was the pilot on STS-127 and 135. And there's a wider shot. You can see astronaut Bob Behnken also in view now. Bob is to the right of your screen, and he also flew on 2 shuttle missions. Bob is a native of St. Ann, Missouri. So if you're watching from Missouri, especially St. Ann, wave hi, there's Bob. And Doug is from Appalachian, New York. He was born in Endicott, considers Appalachian his hometown. I know a lot of people there because I'm from there too. So if you're watching from upstate New York, shout out to you there too. This is so cool to see. Leland, this must bring back memories for you.
It does, but you know, it's a little different than when I was suiting up because there were Apollo era lazy boys that were sitting in and leaning back in, and now they're in these really incredible sleek suits, as well as these the seats that are actually the same seats that are in the Crew Dragon vehicle, and that's
Stages of the Falcon 9 doing their job, placing Bob and Doug into orbit. I mean, this is a day. This is a historical day. This is us kicking off that new era of space flight that we've all been talking about and longing for since the space shuttle program came to an end in 2011.
Yes.
And the weather cooperated.
Yes. Second time's a charm.
Right.
All right, so day for the history books. As you can see, we have lost some live signal there, but the mission still continues, and we're going to send it over to KSC to continue broadcasting live with you.
Signal Newfoundland.
Yeah, Jesse and Dan, we are just in awe over here. When I woke up this morning and looked at the weather forecast, I was like, man, we're going to be back here on Sunday, but we did it. The room cleared out. Everybody was outside watching, and inside the lights were shaking, the cameras were shaking. Lauren came back in with tears in her eyes. This is really amazing.
I can't believe it. I saw it with my own eyes. This is just so grateful. A lot more to go, but I'm so happy they're safe right now. I'm just so happy.
Yeah. Leland, you were talking about it. It's amazing what we can do when we work together.
Yes, American astronauts on an American rocket from American soil, showing you what Americans can do when we come together as a team and blast Doug and Bob off to the cosmos. This is what it's all about, and their families and everyone is working together to take them up to space safely. So I don't know what to say. That rocket fuel is still in my